If I had to use a sports metaphor to describe this movie, I would say we were up at the half, we had a really strong performance in the third quarter, but we fumbled in the fourth and couldn't quite get our momentum back. Now, I really enjoyed this movie, but I did not particularly care for the ending. Tim is a sports movie. It follows Cam. He's a college athlete hoping to go pro, and he gets invited to spend a week training with Isaiah White, who's considered the greatest quarterback of all time. In fact, if Cam does well during this week, he could wind up getting signed to the best team in the league, the San Antonio Saviors. Now, this movie is doing a lot. It is taking a really long, hard look at U.S. football culture, and it's using the lens of organized religion, specifically Christianity, to do that. It's comparing athletes to idols, it's comparing sports rituals to religious rituals. You could even argue that it is comparing professional athletes to Jesus on the cross. The same way Jesus was asked to sacrifice his body and his life to bring his people to the promised land, like heaven save them, Cam is being asked to sacrifice his body and maybe even his life to get the team, the San Antonio Saviors, to the promised land, the championships. In fact, there's actually a really interesting scene where Cam is talking about his love for football and why he's motivated to go pro. And the reporters in that scene are staged the same way that the disciples are staged in Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. And the lighting in the scene is also doing something really interesting. There are these stick lights behind Cam that make him appear as though he is wearing a crown of thorns, imagery that we associate with Jesus if you're a Christian. Now, on top of all this religious symbolism, there's also discussions about CTE happening, the violence in football, there's comparisons to slavery and gladiator fights. Like, I fear if you're not, that familiar with U.S. football culture and the critiques that have been made against it and against the NFL in the past few decades, it might be overwhelming or you might be a little lost at times. In fact, there were moments where I wondered how the critical reception of this film might have changed if instead of touching on so many topics, it picked maybe one or two and just really drilled down on those. Now, if you made it this far, I do have to warn you about spoilers because we're about to get into what happened in the ending of the movie and why I didn't particularly care for it. So the end of this movie took a kind of a page from like Bottoms or Ready or Not's book where the gore and the violence just hit new levels. And I could see the intentionality of that choice. So in the final scene, he runs through a tunnel and he is on a football field where he is asked to sign away his soul to join the San Antonio Saviors. And he decides instead to kill the owners, kill his agent. Like, it's crazy. And I think that was an intentional choice to make that seem crazy because this is like the big game moment. He's on the professional field. There's all this smoke. There's all the cheerleaders. There's like planes flying by. And the spectacle of violence is meant to mirror the spectacle of violence that we have when we watch the big game on Sunday. But for some reason, it just didn't hit for me. Like, I felt like it took me out of the moment and I was like, okay, all right. But that being said, I did overall really enjoy the movie and really enjoy the themes and topics it touched on. And I hope in the future we get more sports horror. Like, there's a lot of room to play with in this lane, especially in the US and how serious we take sports.